Aloha, everybody. It's great and unsurprising, given our guests, to see so many of you in the Zoom room. It's an honor to introduce Kathleen and Ernie. On Saturday, December 10th of 2022, I joined a crowd of an estimated few thousand people on the Walk for Wai. The march from Ke'ehi Lagoon Park to the Navy's Joint Base at Pearl Harbor Hickam, sponsored by a number of community groups who make up the Shut Down Red Hill Coalition, was organized to support the Board of Water Supply in its demands to the Navy, to raise awareness about the existential threat facing our aquifer and our island from fuel and PFAS or forever chemicals, to register the need to act in the face of the Navy's crimes against humanity in poisoning water that we and future generations will depend on. The walk was also an expression of solidarity supported by communities across Oceania who are all too familiar with how, in the name of national security, settler states create conditions of danger and forms of slow and spectacular violence on lands they are occupying. As part of the pre-march protocol at the park, Kumuhina and other organizers called Ernie Lau up to the stage. Noel Kalaunu Shah, a Wai protector and amazing educator of Keiki, led children in a song of mahalo for Ernie. The children also presented him with a lei. The week prior to this event, I had seen Ernie on Hawaii News Now in a December 3rd news conference. Speaking from a sense of his kuleana as a manager and chief engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, a position he has held since 2012, he told of his sleeplessness after hearing the Wai crying out, "No more contamination," and he demanded that the Navy move faster to address the crisis at Red Hill. As I'm sure many of you yourselves witnessed firsthand, his words went viral on social media, and rightly so. Too often, those in positions of administrative power defend the status quo, covering over problems and even crimes with layers of bureaucracies. Ernie's unwavering commitment to fight for the Wai, his willingness to fight for all of us who know that water is life, his ability to be not just a manager, but a water protector whose salty tears are but one way he shows his care for and connection to the Wai, has also made him a hero to many of us. It was moving that day at the march to see the outpouring of love for Ernie as he assumed leadership in the 3.5-mile walk along the Nimitz. After, a party shuttle bus was waiting to take us back to the park. We may not have been celebrating in ways necessitating the shaded windows. I kind of wonder what happens on those party buses, but there was a festive air on the bus following the end of a walk that brought so many people together to stand for each other and for the Wai. As I grabbed a strap at the front of the crowded bus, two people offered me their seats. These people were Ernie Lau and Kathleen Pahinui, who I recognized from Red Hill Coalition Zoom meetings as the Public Information Officer for the Board of Water Supply, a position she has held since 2016. As I took the opportunity to invite them to participate in a brown bag, I expressed my fandom to them both, and it is a pleasure to express it now in this public way. As they take on the might of the military, both Kathleen and Ernie have been willing to get out into the community, to walk alongside of us, to write to us personally, as Ernie has done on Board of Water Supply letterhead. That is like the first time I've gotten a letter like that from a municipal entity, to use television briefings to talk to us as if we were across the kitchen table. In the fight to shut down Red Hill, they understand the importance of sharing stories and of community relations. And I don't mean community relations in a cynical way, but in a way that demonstrates their commitments and care, not only as Board of Water officials, but also as humans, to this Aina and its ways of knowing and feeling, and to all of us. How wonderful then to have them here to join us for a brown bag biography. So please join me in welcoming them here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Cynthia, and welcome everybody. And Cynthia and Craig, you did a wonderful job, and Carolyn and Paige, mahalo, mahalo. And also thank you to all the sponsors for making this happen. It's just, it's overwhelming. I have with me, my associate, Kathleen Elliott Pahinui, and I'll just say that over the last year, over a year now, I would have been would not have been able to make it through if it wasn't for Kathleen kind of urging me along, keeping me going and encouraging me when I get depressed and down, because it seems like the issues are insurmountable. So thank you, Kathleen. But also for the folks that have joined, taken the time to join us today, mahalo for your support on this important issue of protecting our vai, protecting our future for our community, because there is no life without water. I have a short presentation I'm going to share now, and then Kathleen will also speak, and then we'll just open it up to time to talk story. So let me go ahead and share. Okay, I'll get this right eventually. Thank you. So just a quick update on what's happening. And this is a little bit of background on where does our fresh water come from. So for the Board of Water Supply, we're 100% dependent on underground resources of fresh water, what we call aquifers, that exist in the cracks and crevices of the lava rock below our island. Our volcanic rock is very porous, and it's able to absorb like a sponge the water that falls on our Mauka watershed areas, that seeps down through the ground through our forest. And the best forest to capture and hold water is our native forest. It's the most efficient forest to capture water, to recharge our underground aquifers, which are shown here in blue. Basically below the island, because we are surrounded by the Pacific Ocean, salt water seeps through the lava rock also. And that fresh water, being lighter than salt water, is actually held, floats above it. And along the coastlines shown in yellow here in this slide is our cap rock. And we're very blessed. We are blessed by Keakua for the way our island was built and for the water resources that we have. It is really a gift, because this cap rock, which is marine sediments and deposits along the coastal areas of our island, it's not as porous, it's not as permeable, so it doesn't allow the fresh water to flow through it very easily. It acts like a dam surrounding our island, and it allows the fresh water fall, which originates as rain, to build up behind it in this underground aquifer into large capacities. But unfortunately, as you move away from the coastal areas of our island, which is where our cap rock is located, you move inland, and actually you are actually standing above the drinking water aquifer below the freshwater aquifer of our island. And unfortunately, this area in the Halawa Valley area is actually a part of a larger aquifer called the sole source aquifer, Pearl Harbor sole source aquifer for Oahu, that was designated by the EPA back in the 1980s. EPA recognized and agreed that this resource, which supplies at least 50% of the population of our island, was something that there was actually no real alternatives. If we lost this resource, we don't really have any alternative source of water. We can't go to another state to import water from another state to meet our freshwater needs. And a portion of this aquifer in some of the most productive areas is in this Aiea, this Halawa Moana Loa area. And shown here with those little black dots, you can see 2 rows of 10 dots. They represent the tops of the underground storage tanks that the Navy built 80 years ago, preparing for World War II. And these storage tanks still, and the pipelines that connected to Pearl Harbor, they still contain about 104 million gallons. And you can see circled in yellow here, the 2 Navy water sources. Red Hill Shaft was heavily contaminated back in November of 2021 and led to the water system that the Navy operates for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam actually having jet fuel and petroleum in their drinking water. So when they turned on their faucets in their kitchens, they could see oily film on the water, they could smell fuel, and some even described it as smelling like a gas station in their very homes on the base. So that was definitely heavily contaminated. The Navy also, as a precaution, shut down their Navy Aiea Halawa Shaft, which is across Halawa Valley there, circled in yellow. Circled in red are the 3 border water supply wells that are still shut down as a precaution. Because in this area, the underground aquifer between the Red Hill side, Kapukaki side of the valley, and the Aiea Halawa side, that same aquifer is connected, and we believe there is a potential for flow across the valley. So as a precaution to avoid sending any kind of fuel contamination into the drinking water system serving Honolulu and the Aiea Halawa communities, we decided in December of 2021 to shut it down, shut these 3 wells down. And they will still stay shut down until I can be sure that if we turn them on, we won't inadvertently kind of draw or suck the contamination through the aquifer across the valley from Red Hill to our wells and send it into our water system. And on top of all this, from what happened in 2021, we now just go a year later, also in November, on November 29, 2022, the Navy, which has a firefighting foam system there, what they call AFFF, aqueous film forming foam, they spilled 1,300 gallons of the concentrate liquid that is used to generate the foam to put out fires in this underground Red Hill facility. And they spilled out and got into the environment. So we're very concerned. It contains PFAS, which is some of those chemicals that are a large concern, growing concern within our community and within the EPA. And these chemicals don't break down easily in the environment. And this is just a graphic that was provided, basically what they call a heat map. The Department of Health shared this to the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee a few years ago. And it shows in that period of time from November to December, after the leaks occurred that contaminated the water system for the Navy base, Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in November of 2021, this is what, looking for that period 3 months after, they took the highest values that they detected in groundwater in the aquifer for this contaminant called total petroleum hydrocarbon in the diesel range. They took the highest values and plotted it at various locations, and these white dots represent monitor well locations, and they basically extrapolated and created a heat map. The darker colors represent higher concentrations, and you can see at this where my cursor is, that represents Red Hill Shaft, their drinking water source that sent the fuel contaminated water directly into their system. The darker colors are higher concentrations in parts per micrograms per liter, which is parts per billion. The lighter colors represent the lower concentrations. But you can see generally, and I appreciate the health department showing this because this gives you an idea of potentially the spread of the contamination in the underground aquifer for this particular contaminant, that it spreads not only under the facility, but it's spread westward toward Halawa Valley and into Halawa Valley, and also eastward into the Mauna Loa area. And this is the Mauna Loa golf course here. But also what is concerning to us is also the spread to the northwest, toward the north, actually above and away to the north of the Red Hill Fuel Facility. So we believe that unless the regulators and the Navy can prove otherwise, that we're assuming that leaks from the Red Hill tank will spread potentially across Halawa Valley and potentially into Mauna Loa Valley. We just don't know what direction, I mean, how much and where the contaminant plumes are at this time. And like I said, November 29th of last year, this is when I couldn't, I just woke up in the middle of the night around 2 o'clock in the morning. And just like when I got the news that evening, I got a call from one of the Navy admirals about 7 o'clock that evening. I had an earlier call from the director of health that they'd spilt this chemical, this toxic chemical containing PFAS that's used to make firefighting foam. And they spilled 1,300 gallons there. So that night I kind of sat in bed and was laying down in bed, and it was almost like, and maybe it's my imagination, but I almost felt like I could hear the Vai over in that area crying out in pain, asking to stop this contamination, stop spilling this chemicals in the Vai, like a cry for help. And it made me just very sad. And the reason why we work so hard at the Board of Water Supply, that in our mission, our responsibility to provide safe drinking water to our community began back in 1929, is that we know that water is life. And these freshwater resources are all the freshwater resources we have for our community. So just moving on, PFAS is a family of chemicals that's used commonly since the 50s. Gives clothing or carpeting stain resistance, or makes things water resistant. Your nonstick pans, I have some of those still in my home. It's also used for fighting fires. So the military back in the 70s, I believe, working with, I think, 3M Corporation, looked to develop something to be able to put out petroleum or fuel fires in storage facilities, at airports, at the airfields, or in underground fuel tanks, because we know that fighting a fuel fire, you don't put water on it, because water would just spread that fire around, because fuel floats on that water. So they came up with this system of developing a foam that would actually suffocate the fires and put it out. And they unfortunately are using PFAS, use PFAS in that foam. The thing about PFAS that we're so worried about is that it's very water soluble. So it dissolves easily into water. And also, because of that, it can easily leach into groundwater below, or into surface water, into water and streams, and it can contaminate drinking water. And the other thing, because this PFAS chemical is made out of carbons and fluorine atoms, the bond between the carbon and fluorine atoms are very strong. So these chemicals, by the way they're built, they don't break down very easily in the environment. And that's thus why people tend to call them forever chemicals. They last a long, long time in the environment. And and shown here in yellow, the potential health effects, including, developmental effects on children, thyroid, liver, kidneys, and potentially even cancer. And this is the thing that's been kind of maddening for us, is that we have been trying to get information about what's happening there. But apparently, and we appreciate the Department of Health and EPA sending this letter to us, because this letter was part of an information request we sent just late last year to both the EPA and Department of Health after the PFAS incident back on November 29th. We wanted to understand what has happened at Red Hill. How long have they been using AFFF firefighting foam systems there at Red Hill? What has been the occurrences where they've deployed the foam in the facility, or leaked or spilled the foam or a concentrate liquid like they did back in November 29th? And this is one of the letters they shared with us, a letter addressed to the Navy dated November 2nd, 2022. And I put in, I put a red box around the paragraph that caught my eye here. It refers to a laboratory report from samples taken by the Navy from Red Hill Shaft, RHMW 2254-01 is actually the state well number. 2254-01 is the state official well number for that water source. On December 20th and December 27th, 2021, they actually detected PFAS chemicals in that water. This is after the Red Hill shaft had been shut down. And 2 different samples, they came up with detections of PFOA and PFOS. So in this letter, the Department of Health is asking the Navy to go back and test samples they still may have of water taken out of Red Hill shaft after that contamination incident in 2021. And we're still waiting on that information. We haven't seen any results or information from the Department of Health or EPA, but it shows to me that there was knowledge that PFAS is a contaminant of concern for this facility. And then on top of that, when we looked at their website, and this is publicly accessible, we're required as operators of public and community water systems to annually put out to all of our customers what we call water quality reports. What have we detected? What kind of chemicals and at what levels have we detected in the water sources serving our community, serving our customers? So the Navy also has to put out this report. And these 2 reports go back to 2020 and 2021. And you can see I put a red box around it, clearly showing detections of PFAS chemicals, 5 or 6 PFAS chemicals. 2021 from their Aiea Halawa shaft chlorinator, which is their water source across Halawa Valley from the Red Hill facility. In 2020, it wasn't clear which water source they had those detections. So I think PFAS is something of growing concern for our community, and we are trying to understand the scope and magnitude of the problem by asking the military. And we've written a letter to the Secretary of Defense asking for all information they may have about military facilities on Oahu, whether it's been closed or still operating. We want to know what AFFF systems have been used on those bases containing PFAS chemicals, whether the facility is closed or operating. We would need to understand what the scope of the problem might be that our community, that the BWS might face in the future. Additionally, and thank you everybody that came out to the town hall meetings put on by the EPA and Department of Health, the EPA and the Navy. DOH wasn't there except on the second night on the open house. But thank you for coming out. Thank you for submitting testimony on this consent order that the EPA is proposing with the Navy, basically a settlement agreement, a voluntary settlement agreement. The deadline to make comments is next week, Monday. So the February 6th is the deadline to make your comments officially on this. Our concerns are really this document, when we looked at it, is really unclear on strict deadlines. And the penalties for non-compliance are not very strong and they're not very strict. There's also no opportunities, we didn't see in it, opportunities for stakeholder or public participation. It doesn't even address the recent AFFF PFAS chemical spill they had on November 29th. And there is also the state's emergency order, which dictates the closure and shutdown of the Red Hill facility. So you're going to have 2 different documents. Department of Health is not signatory to this proposed order. So how do you resolve the conflicts that might occur in the future between, say, the Department of Health and the EPA and the Navy? And we think it's premature to enter into a settlement agreement when the damage to the environment, to our water resources, are still unknown. So why are we trying to reach the settlement agreement right now? And at this point, I'll just stop and turn over to Kathleen to talk about our efforts in water conservation. Kathleen.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. I appreciate it. Mahalo, I see many familiar names in the list today, and so it's great to see some old friends out there. Please go back to the other graph, Ernie. Thank you, thank you. So when the Red Hill fiasco happened in November of 2021, and we were forced to shut down our Halawa shaft, and then in December, our Halawa wells and Aiea wells, Ernie and I sat down and said, we need to get the message out to people that this is going to affect our water availability in those areas, Metro Honolulu and in the Aiea Halava area. Aiea Halava lost 50% of their water supply, and Halava Shaft supplies 20% of the water to Metro Honolulu. One thing we knew we could do and that we could get out the message really quickly, because something we do all the time, is water conservation. We know it works. We know people respond to our requests for water conservation. In this graph that we have that from 2007 to August of 2021, you can see there's been a downward trend in water usage overall in this on our island. And that, of course, also includes visitors to our island as well as residents. So we do know conservation works, and we figured if we could come up with a very strong program immediately, this could help us get us through the summer months. As you know, unfortunately, besides the fiasco and crisis at Red Hill, we ended up with an extremely dry winter. Winter is our rainy time of the season. That's where we get most of our rainfall, and that's what helps us recharge our aquifer. And last year was not the case. We had a extremely wet December and then nothing for like pretty much all of last year. It was very dry, and we were extremely concerned that we were going to run into a problem as we got into the hot summer months, especially the months August, September, and October, where we might overextend and reach our what we call our max day demand. We were very blessed. People heeded our call for conservation, and we never got to that point. The thing we always will try to avoid is having to institute mandatory conservation measures, or what we call moratoriums. And we do have a water shortage plan in place that was approved by our board last year, and you can find that on our website. But we don't want to have to tell people you have to stop using water for these certain days of the week to water your lawn or fill your pool or any other potential needs that you might have. So we really appreciate the hard work that our community pulled together. And it was an island-wide effort. Even though 2 areas were mostly affected, we wanted everybody to raise the consciousness of everybody on the island. This is an island problem. This isn't a Metro Honolulu problem or a Halava problem. This is an island problem. This is something we all need to pull together and take on as our kuleana. Next slide, please. So we have 7, you guys have probably seen this over the many years that we've done our water conservation. We came up with the 7 tips back in 2004, and they're very simple things that people can do in their own home to help reduce water waste. You know, you waste about 2 gallons a minute if you let your faucet run while you're brushing your teeth. Simply turn off the faucet while you're brushing your teeth and then turn it back on to rinse. And that can save at least 4 gallons if you take 2 minutes or so to brush your teeth. The other thing we learned, and we got a lot of great tips from the community once we started this effort. We really got people were calling us up, emailing us, sending us letters saying, oh, this is what I do in my home. Well, Manager Lau was reading the paper one day and saw a letter from a lady saying, well, what I do is I put a 5-gallon bucket under my faucet when I'm letting my shower heat up, and then I use that water to flush our toilet. So he went out and bought a 5-gallon bucket. Now he does that. And we've met a lot of people that do that. So they're simple things you can do in your own home that don't require a lot of effort or money just to save water in your home. And it really does make a difference. And it protects our water, you know, not just for today or for tomorrow, but for our future. You know, in Hawaiian culture, looking over generations, that's how they look. They look not just today or tomorrow, but over 7 generations or longer. And that's what we're doing. We're looking over long time, future generations, not just our great-grandchildren, but their great-grandchildren. We want to make sure that our water is here, not just for today, but forever and moving forward. Next slide, please. So we did a lot of things. We knew we had to reach out like we are doing today to this great group of people. You know, we talked to everybody that we could. We did little advertising segments on various news stations. We reached out through social media. We instituted a program with condominiums to watch their water irrigation and and give information to their residents. Because even though they don't get a water bill, they still use water. So they're what we call hard to reach. And we really wanted to make sure that we were getting that message to everybody, not just single family homeowners. We reached out to various industries. We're partnering with the Hawaii Community Foundation, Freshwater Council. We've done water audits, and we're doing water audits in restaurants and hotels. We've done op-eds and then radio and television PSAs. Next slide, please. And one of the critical things we did too, if you ever want information, especially on Red Hill, go to protectoahuwater.org. And it's kind of a one-stop shop for information on conservation, the latest things that we've got from Red Hill. And we test those affected wells in our area weekly, and we put those tests up on our website so you can see the whole document. And if you ever have a question about anything, please don't ever hesitate to call us, and we're happy to help or provide information. This is also just a brief list of many of the groups and organizations and we've reached out to over the course of the last year in trying to raise people's awareness. And I have to say, people have been very welcoming of the conservation message and looking at ways that they can do within, including the University of Hawaii, to reduce their water usage. Next slide, please. Part of this program is we have a very robust rebate program called Water Sensible, both commercial and in residential. And one of the things we just launched, because one of the big water wasters is a leaky toilet, we now have toilet rebates. So if anyone wants to replace the toilet, please give me a call, 808-748-5319, and we're happy to direct you to our water rebate program. So thank you. Next slide, please. And this is just a snapshot of our dashboard for our water rebate program. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you will see we have saved over 720 million gallons, lifetime gallons saved through this program, which started in 2018. So in 4 years, we've saved, quadruple the amount of water that we pump on a daily basis. And that's really, really great. This is an effort that will, again, extend our water resources for many generations to come. Next slide, please. And what we do every month at our board meeting, our Water Resource Program Administrator, Barry Usagawa, provides a report on watershed. We go out and we have rain gauges across the island. So this shows our monthly water report. And so you can see in 2022, going from July 2021 to December 2022, our rainfall was pretty much below normal pretty much the entire year. May was the only month that actually got just a tiny bit over average rainfall. And after that, it was pretty much below. So conservation was critical and really made a difference in our getting through last summer. And we're so, again, appreciative of the community heeding the call. Next slide, please. And again, this is showing our water monthly production, our water usage, and our 2022 is the bright green line. As you can see, we did really well. It was mostly below average until we got towards those summer hotter months, but it still did pretty well. We did pretty well. We're very grateful that people, again, were heeding it. But as you can see, that we track this stuff very carefully, and this helps us allow us to take care of our, to pivot in our messaging wherever we need to. So during this time last year, Mr. Lau asked for everybody to cut back by 10%. And we did. We saw a reduction, as you can see by this chart, that, good, healthy reduction through most of last year, which we're very grateful for. We've kind of backed off of that messaging now, but we're still doing conservation message through through our toilet rebate program and through some other initiatives. And then we'll ramp up again as we head into the hot summer months. But again, we're so very grateful for that. Conservation is the single most important tool we have to help protect our water sources. The next most important tool we have is the public, the community. And again, we've got to solve the Red Hill problem. It's a crisis of a magnitude that this community has never seen. And if we don't solve it, and it's going to take all of us working together, as Ernie pointed out, it will not be good for our island, that is for sure. So thank you very much for your time.